It's at this point, like, who cares if a guy has a face or not? He has one half of a face, and sometimes that's good enough. In sleep, he called to me. In dreams, he came. I don't know what kind of dreams he's having, but we're gonna talk about the clothes. My name is Teresa, and this is Phantom of the Opera. Today's video is a topic that will elicit a lot of, Because today I am exceptionally low in energy. That's good for you. You're saved because I don't even feel like singing. Ordinarily, I would want to sing every single one of these songs. Every single one from beginning to end. These are the songs that I sing in my shower. What a night on a road trip. What a crowd while washing the dishes. Makes you glad, makes you proud. Randomly while working out, I can be on the floor doing Pilates, doing planks, and I'll just start singing music of the night. I don't know why. I think I'm insane. For many years, I've had Phantom of the Opera, the entire soundtrack running through my head because I am a not-so-secret, self-professed fan. P-H-A-N. Fan. Let me tell you about my obsession with the Phantom of the Opera, and then we'll talk about the clothes. We're going to talk about the costumes, namely Christine's many costume changes. The Phantom, he has a few costume changes, but mostly, it's really about the dresses here. We're going to skim a little bit of 1880s fashion history, which is something I know you've been looking forward to. I'm sure 1880s fashion history is on the forefront of everybody's mind right now, so I will give you the Cliff Notes version of it, and then we'll talk about some juicy Phantom tidbits. They're not really that juicy, just whatever. We'll just freestyle the Phantom of the Opera and we'll see where we end up. And knowing me, we are going to end up somewhere extremely random and extremely weird. Buckle your seatbelts, folks. Baby. I don't know why I called you a baby. I didn't mean to call anybody baby. Buckle your seatbelts, because it's gonna be a bumpy ride. I just went on the most emotionally driven story time I've ever delivered. I even broke down in tears, and then I realized I wasn't recording. Then I broke down into tears for a different reason. So let's hope third time's a charm. Of course, everybody knows Andrew Lloyd Webber's famous musical, Phantom of the Opera, headlined by the original Phantom, Michael Crawford and Sarah Brightman, who was married to Andrew Lloyd Webber. It was kind of a situation of life imitating art where he wrote this musical for her, and in the musical, the Phantom wrote Don Juan triumphant for Christine. She was his muse, his angel of music, and I think they're currently divorced, but on good terms. In 2004, the movie based on Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical came out, and that was my first introduction into the story of Phantom of the Opera. It starred Gerard Butler as the Phantom, Emmy Rossum as Christine. Prior to that, I've definitely heard the music of Phantom of the Opera. It's kind of like impossible not to hear the music. My dad used to work as an electronics repairman, and what he would specialize in is repair broken CD players in cars. People would jam in their CD players, it'll get stuck, it wouldn't work anymore, and then he would fix that. But for some reason, they didn't care about getting their CDs back, or the CDs were scratched. So he brought them home. So I had like a eclectic collection of CDs, the Andrew Lloyd Webber greatest hits. And on that CD is Music of the Night, of course, Phantom of the Opera, and Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again. Those are the three songs that I knew from Phantom of the Opera. All the other songs I didn't really know. Prior to the movie, I've seen music video clips from the 80s of Sarah Brightman and Michael Crawford, and I thought it looked really dated, really weird. Like Michael Crawford, famous for using his long-fingered hands as the Phantom's expressive dance gestures, like this. Lots of original Phantom fans love it, but I thought it was weird and I didn't care for it. But the movie was my first introduction to the musical. It was probably everybody else's introduction too. I was so excited to watch it. In the end, it fell flat. It was underwhelming. It looked very pretty. It was very scrumptious. The costumes were beautifully designed. The lead actors were very beautiful. During the early 2000s, Gerard Butler was set up to be on the brink of superstardom. Now we know him as the guy in all these disaster movies that are straight to streaming, like Geostorm. Gerard Butler was the man back in the day. He looked very good as the Phantom. Unfortunately, the movie was underwhelming. It didn't really do anything for me. I felt like the acting was pretty wooden. Like even during the emotional scenes, I felt nothing. And I thought like, why does everybody love the Phantom of the Opera? Why is it a beloved musical, like one of the most famous musicals on the West End and Broadway? Why do I hear about ladies returning time and time again to watch the musical? I just didn't get it. Fast forward to 2012. I picked up the DVD of the 25th anniversary concert at the Royal Albert Concert Hall, starring Sierra Boggess as Christine Daae and Ramin Karmiloo as the Phantom, as Eric the Phantom. Let me calm down. I lost my freaking mind when I saw this version. It was my first time seeing the staged version of the musical rather than the movie. There was something about both the lead actors acting, the nuance of it, that really touched me in a way that I can't even explain. And this is like second time explaining it, and I can't even put it into words. Like the first time I broke down into tears because there's something so heartbreaking about Ramin's portrayal of the Phantom. It transcends the Phantom being a jerk, being an over-controlling jerk. I just felt so sorry for him. He did all the hand gestures that Michael Crawford did, but for some reason, it seemed real to me, like the nuance of his hand gestures, so heartbreaking. His alienation, his isolation just seemed so relatable to me versus an actor being in a musical that's just kind of campy. Ramin, by the way, has a beautiful voice. It's not a baritone. It's somewhere in the middle. He has a wide vocal range and he uses it to such emotional depths. There was something about his voice that just really struck a chord with me. And after that, I watched this musical over and over again. First of all, the production was beautiful. The costumes were gorgeous. They were basically the same costumes as the original production. The costumes don't really change that much, but it was just so scrumptious, a feast for the eyes, colorful, luminous, whatever adjectives of greatness one can bestow on this production, I will bestow it. It really comes down to how the actors played the characters. Even on a huge stage upon a massive audience, they really conveyed the emotions. They portrayed facial acting nuance, and Ramin made me actually feel sorry for the Phantom, which it was hinted that the Phantom is a autistic savant, and I can definitely see that because he is a musical genius. He's also a great architect. I mean, he designs labyrinths of death. He's really bad at social interactions. He's really bad at making his feelings known for his beloved Christine. He just goes about courting her in the worst ways possible by abducting her and forcing her to wear a wedding dress so that she could forcibly marry him, and then taking her fiance as hostage and threatening to hang him, and then murdering a bunch of innocent opera goers by a fallen chandelier, and then murdering the lead of the opera, the guy that works up in the rafters. He loves to hang people. He's got that lasso and he's not afraid to use it. He was really proficient in his art, in his music, but he was not really good at expressing his feelings and dealing with people and just being around people in general. He didn't really like people, that's why he kills them. He's kind of a jerk, but for some reason, you have to see Ramin's performance. He made me feel the alienation, the isolation, the loneliness of the Phantom, his yearning to be normal, his yearning for beauty. Oh my gosh! The whole line about being a gargoyle who lives in hell but dreams of beauty. It's over for me, guys. I thought it was acidic, but I'm still very, very much romantical. I love the Phantom so much. I think I'm actually in love with him. I mean, he has a lot of flaws. I mean, he is like a natural born killer. He has no face, but I don't care. It's at this point, like, who cares if a guy has a face or not? He has one half of a face, and sometimes that's good enough. There's plastic surgeries that could deal with his deformities nowadays. We could get him a new face. He has like some personality issues. Like, he's very controlling. He's very overbearing. He definitely puts the voice on a pedestal. Let's not mention that he did kill a opera house full of people, and then he likes to choke people when he doesn't get his way. He even tried to choke Christine. It's a little sus, but those are definitely issues we could bring up in couples therapy. And he has Gothic-y interior design aesthetics. I don't know if he likes to compromise. He might just want to choke to get his way. And he's a wounded individual. I think he has like lifetime PTSD from being rejected from his mother. Overall, he dresses very well. He like cares a lot about his appearance. He cares a lot about his hair. His hair is never out of place. He's always wearing a tux. He has a fancy cap, and he also has a fancy hat. That kind of counterbalances the killing and the controlling and the lack of face. Maybe I'm glad he's not real. The events of Phantom of the Opera took place roughly around 1880s Paris. The female dress silhouettes of the 1880s had a very hard, very defined back bustle. The bodice, very tight. Vertical seams, or the princess line, took the place of horizontal seams. Everything on the top is very tight, giving way to a huge booty. It was like the dressmaker's BBL in many ways. Women's gowns had ample space for a lot of crap that you could put on it. The saying goes, you wear your wealth on your person, so the richer you were, the more extravagant your embellishments were. You could have bows, ruffles, flounces, flutter, and lace. And this decoration was not just for evening wear, it was also seen on day gowns as well. Meanwhile, men's fashion in the 1880s was rather dull compared to women's fashion. As always, they wore black. The ideal men's silhouette was long and slender. The male suit was coming into fashion at this time, as well as the three-piece suit, jacket, waistcoat, and pants. So basically, the man's silhouette is a three-piece suit, a tuxedo, black and white, and maybe some navy thrown in. Just imagine your classic Academy Award show, and there you have it, men's fashion with slight variations. It remains the same, but the female fashion, tight bottoms, huge back bustle, curly regal updo, a hat with lots of decoration, lots of feathers. Everybody looked good, but they seemed very uncomfortable. So this is what I call Christine's Think of Me dress. What I find very admirable about Phantom of the Opera is that every single outfit that Christine wears is incredibly efficient. She starts off as a ballet girl in the chorus, the red, green, and gold outfit with fringe skirts. Then when she takes over Carlotta's role in Hannibal, they do a quick costume change, give her a full skirt. And then when she does the infamous Phantom of the Opera scene, when she's taken down by Gondola into his underground abode, she doesn't have to do a full costume change. She adds on a skirt, she takes off the skirt, she slips on a white tea gown. It's very cool, very aesthetic, very efficient, and it really speaks to the genius of Maria Bjornson, who created these designs. And speaking of Think of Me, Christine spends the first third of the musical in her white ruffled tea gown. What can I say about this tea gown and the styling of her hair, the long cascades, the fluttered, fluted sleeves? In some versions, she's holding a candle, a candelabra, as the Phantom leads her down to his lair, and then they duet together. It's got all these Gothic touches. A huge part of the vibe of the book is a very Gothic novel. For those of you who don't know, the Gothic novel, very popular in the Victorian age, and when I think of Gothic novels, I think of Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights. Basically, you want a dark, broody hero like Heathcliff, like Mr. Rochester, and the Phantom definitely qualifies as that dark and broody hero. There is always something wrong with him. He is like a toxic boyfriend, always very domineering, and he wears a lot of black. He's kind of like Edward Cullen in many ways, but I don't want to go there. I don't want to go that Twilight route. He could definitely be a vampire. She is always this innocent, virginal maiden with great cascading curls, and she's always in a white nightgown, tramping through the moors, holding a candelabra. The Gothic novel is all about pairing that innocent, virginal maiden with the dark and brooding guy with a family secret or a curse. It never really ends well for them. They never really get together. It ends with somebody dying. It's actually kind of a depressing genre, but this is what we have in the Phantom of the Opera in many ways is peak Gothic novel. I mean, you have Christine in her flowy white tea gown, and you have the Phantom dressed in black, dressed immaculately, by the way, dressed like he's going to a ball, a soiree, because he's in a tux. I don't know if he wears the tux all the time, but we are led to believe that he does. He has a cape, a very nicely embroidered cape. He has a dashing, rakish hat. Obviously, he would wear the best mask that money can buy. I mean, he doesn't really like have a job. He's self-employed. He lives rent-free. In fact, the former owner of the opera house pays him to live under the opera house. If he doesn't get paid his monthly salary, then he will rain death and destruction on the opera house. So it would be bad for business. So basically, he gets money through extortion, kind of like the mafia. So like in order for the opera house owner to continue to run his business without any trouble, then he has to pay the opera ghost. That's a great way to make money. It's a little morally gray here, but that's how the Phantom affords to keep himself dressed in style, to keep himself in these tailor-made tuxes. I don't think he would ever buy off the rack. In the 1880s, the Industrial Revolution was in full bloom. They were starting to make ready-made clothing items, but the Phantom, he only likes bespoke clothing. He has fine taste in everything. In the original book and in the Susan Kay version, he has a servant. He has like a Persian servant. He's there on his own free will. They're fast friends. They met in his past when he used to be the architect for the King of Persia, and he made like a room of mirrors because he's really good at making death trappish designs. He's like Frank Lloyd Wright in many ways, and he was handsomely paid for it. And then he acquired a servant. The servant is his friend, his bodyguard, and his butler. So the servant would take care of his clothes. The servant would take care of getting him fed. And also, according to the Susan Kay retelling of the Phantom of the Opera, he shot up morphine every single day, and he also smoked opium. He had a pipe or bong. If the Phantom of the Opera were alive right now, I don't even know what kind of narcotics he would be into, but he definitely did that. And I think it's not so much to take away his facial disfigurement pain, but just like his inner pain, because it's just a rage for him to live. This guy, he's a tortured artist, just like Mozart, just like Kurt Cobain. That's what he is. His only joy in life is to train to groom Christine Daae, who is by all counts a minor. The Phantom takes her down to his lair, and then he sings for her the music of the night, which is very seductive, by the way. It's like his song of seduction. If he was an exotic bird courting a woman, that would be his exotic bird dance, his music of the night. That like gets the women every time. So if you are a single male and you want to court some women, why don't you learn how to sing and sing music of the night? Because that will get you so much action. And even though she is like, who is this guy? She knows who he is, but she doesn't know who he is because he's been speaking to her through her mirror, her two-way mirror. He's just been watching her through this two-way mirror, which is kind of creepy, by the way, but let's ignore that. And she's so enraptured by his song until he shows her the mirror bride, which is a mannequin likeness he made of her in a wedding gown, which is like also super creepy. That's like the equivalent of dating some dude who you found out was your stalker, and then you visit his apartment and you see a wall full of telephoto photos of you. His actions are a little questionable, and when I explain it to you, it sounds like, Teresa, what is your problem? Why are you so hooked on this guy? The answer is, I don't rightly know. You just have to hear him sing. In my Phantom of the Opera obsession, I watched this documentary, which you can find on YouTube. It's called Behind the Mask, and it's all about the making of the Phantom of the Opera, the original version with the original cast. During this Music of the Night number, Michael Crawford specifically requested that his sleeves be tailored shorter so that it could elongate his hands, because the Phantom has very long hands, very long seductive fingers, which he uses to play the piano. He uses it to tickle the keys and to tickle Christine's heart and her libido. I just wanted to mention that because that's a very juicy tidbit. In the 25th anniversary concert, I didn't see that the sleeves were tailored shorter for Ramin's Phantom of the Opera outfit, but I definitely remembered that he had a signet ring. It was a signet ring with a sapphire in it. He definitely had meatier hands than Michael Crawford, whereas Michael Crawford had these like long, slender, ghostly fingers. Ramin had like some meaty mitts. He did great things with his hands as well. a lot of like reaching out into the audience and grasping invisible stars, grasping their hearts. He grabbed my heart, that's for sure. The Music of the Night number, it was a triumph of singing. My God, the singing. The rooftop scene, her 18th century French court dress, the mint cape. She's in a play within play, starring in an opera set in the 18th century. Very much captures that 18th century French Rococo decadence. It has nothing to do with the 1880s. She embodies that 18th century frosted pastel, like you're walking into a bakery color palette. And that brings us to the midpoint when Raoul proposes to Christine. And when you think about it, Christine and Raoul are kind of like a love at first sight type of couple. I don't really know how much they have in common. I don't really know what kind of deep soul-searching conversations they had with each other than that they were childhood sweethearts and he was enraptured by her singing. She seems like a sweet, kind girl that he could marry. But I suppose marriages back then, even now, are based on less. She definitely shouldn't marry the Phantom, though. He seems appealing. He's got that dark and broody bad boy vibe, but I feel like that would end in disaster. Let me just talk about Love Never Dies, the sequel to Phantom of the Opera. It's 10 years later. Christine and Raoul have been married for 10 years. He's developed a drinking problem. He's now a full-blown alcoholic, and Christine is now the most famous singer in all of France. She is commissioned by Oscar Hammerstein of Rodgers and Hammerstein fame to sing at Coney Island, but it turns out that was just a ploy because it was actually the Phantom that brought her there. And then it turned out Christine and Raoul have a child. That child is actually Christine and the Phantom's biological son. So I've watched Phantom of the Opera so many times. How did they have a son? Like, when did that happen? Because I don't think there was any moment where they, did it. There's no moment. That has always perplexed me about Love Never Dies. I think they retcon all of Phantom of the Opera. Unless we're supposing that they did it during Music of the Night or after Music of the Night when she was kind of like passed out. But then later on in the musical number Beneath a Moonless Sky, it's hinted that she came to him in the middle of the night before the angry mob drove him away. That's when they succumbed to their mutual desires. In the original Phantom of the Opera, he said that this deformity that poisons our love also denies me the joys of the flesh. Does that mean that his facial deformities also travel all the way down so that he is impotent and he can't have children, but then we see that he can? I'm thinking too much into this because I'm really obsessed with the Phantom of the Opera. And speaking of angry mobs, were we speaking of angry mobs? We are now. Have you ever noticed that French novels have an inordinate amount of angry mobs, and they're always so mean to people with deformities? Like, I draw your attention to Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I haven't read, but I've seen the Disney movie. That's good enough for me. That is the only Disney movie that made me cry. The scene when Quasimodo is bullied by the mob. I mean, why are they so mean to him? I just have a soft spot in my heart for characters with deformities and handicaps. I get so angry if I see mobs bullying them. It was like so uncalled for the freaking mob to attack Quasimodo like that. He can't help it if his face looks like that. That's his face, just like the Phantom's face. So I would have to say Quasimodo definitely didn't deserve it. I mean, he was just minding his own business. He just wanted to participate in the Feast of Fools. He wanted to know what it's like to live amongst the regular people instead of in his bell tower. But the Phantom, I felt like maybe he deserved his angry mob because he did kill a lot of people and he did kind of terrorize the opera house. So they're a little angry at him and that's why they want to kill him. That makes sense. He is like public enemy number one. But I'm sure that he was the hapless victim of a lot of angry mobs before he came to the opera house. His own mother didn't even care for him because he was ugly. And whose fault is that? It's probably hers. Probably all that wine she drank before she had him, fetal alcohol syndrome. That's probably what he was suffering from. Like with Quasimodo, he's overcome his birth defect and he's found gainful employment in the bell tower. I'm not sure if they pay him or anything. I think he's actually just working there for free as a place to stay, like a barter of labor and shelter. Whereas the Phantom, he's a bright guy. He's overcome it. He enjoys the finer things in life. It's sad that he has to live underground. In modern day London, space is so scarce that rich people are building out their homes underground. So they're just following in the Phantom's footsteps. The Phantom is a case in which your birth defect and how you're treated makes you grow up into an asshole. But then he has creative outlets. So he is a walking contradiction. He is the example of black and white existing in one man. In one man, the anti-hero. The Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again dress is actually the only wardrobe item that belongs to Christine. Because when you think about it, 90% of her wardrobe items come from stage costume, from all her opera appearances, her ballet girl dance, and the final dress at the end, the wedding gown, was commissioned by the Phantom. He had it made for her, bespoke. He forced her to wear it, so actually that doesn't really belong to her. She wouldn't have chosen that dress if it was up to her. This is actually her real outfit, and it's the only 1880s dress in the entire musical. They didn't go full bustle. It would have made all the actresses' life on stage very difficult. It's a dress that's very hard to move in. They can't really back up while doing their scene. The back bustle would have contributed to a pigeon-like way of movement. They would have tread across the stage because the back bustle pushes your front forward, so you're walking around like this. And that can severely inhibit the performance. I don't feel great. I honestly feel like I want to throw up right here, right now. Which brings us to Don Juan Triumphant, the Phantom's magnum opus, the musical that he's been working on for I don't know how long. And apparently when he forced the entire opera to perform his musical, everybody hates the musical. Carlotta, the prima donna lead soprano, thinks it sucks. You know, she's his #1 critic. He wrote this musical so that Christine could star in it and he can star in it, which is really weird. Like, he wrote a musical for himself to star in it with Christine. It worries me to confront the truth. All this time, we are made to believe that the Phantom is a prodigy. He's like Mozart, except that he can't be like Mozart because he's got a deformed face and he has to live in darkness. But because he's such a musical genius, it would make up for all that homicide. If everybody hates his musical, does that mean that he really is not that great of a musician, of a composer that we thought he was? Like, all this time we thought he was making a masterpiece, and then it just turns out that he was just creating subpar music. That's very disappointing. We're invested now. We're invested in his genius. I really hope that he is still a genius. But in any event, he kills the operatic male lead, Piangi, so that he could take over. He could live out his like simp fantasies for Christine. And in this number, in The Point of No Return, the sexy number, she is wearing a pink ruffled, Spanish-inspired 17th century dress. The wide skirt silhouette mantua. Her dress is hemmed at the ankles, and it's very reminiscent of the subject of this painting by Diego Velázquez, Spanish painter, mid-1600s. It's Christine's sexy number. She really taps into her inner seductress. Everything's unlocked. Her innocent virginal maiden persona takes a backseat to the fiery vixen that she is inside, that the Phantom's music has brought out in her. Because the Phantom's music is really kind of like seductive music. It's like club music, you know what I'm saying? Like, you feel the beats of the rhythm of the night. He's in the musical with her, and they get a little hot and heavy in their choreography. Ramin's hand gesture again. In this version, he is wearing a black tablecloth over his head. You can't see him, but you know it's him because hand gestures. There's a lot of spicy chemistry between them. His hands are literally shaking, his fingers literally shaking as he tries to touch her, but he can't touch her because he's autistic, an autistic savant, probably an incel. He's hot though. Half of him is hot. I appreciate that too. That is some music appreciation that I also appreciate. At the end of the scene is one of my favorite parts, is when he is busted by the theater police and he turns around and he sings in the same melody as All I Ask of You. The leitmotif gives her his signet ring, and then he abducts her. There's so much emotion in his voice at that moment, a shaking of the vocal cords that I too, in watching it, I was shook I was shook and I was taken by that broody, autistic, musical incel. And that brings us to the finale. Back in the Phantom's lair, Christine is in her wedding dress that she's been forced to wear. Raoul is in hot pursuit. They tell him to put his hands at the level of his eye in case the Phantom sneaks up on him and tries to choke him with the lasso. They perform that operatic thing that may annoy a lot of people, in which all the characters sing on top of each other, rising into crescendo. Christine feels so sorry for that poor creature of darkness that she hugs him and then she kisses him. He's like afraid to touch her. He's, what do I do with my hands? Do I hug her? Do I touch her? And that's just so adorable. I'm really supposed to talk about her wedding dress, but what can I say about a wedding dress that hasn't been said before? It's a Gothic looking wedding dress. Let me just end it here. It didn't end happily for the Phantom. It ended with him being chased away by a fiery mob. The 25th anniversary at the Royal Albert Concert Hall. If you like this video, like it. I don't know if that works. It'll bring more of me to you. And definitely, if you want more of me, subscribe. Subscribe to my channel for more nonsense next time. I have to use the bathroom, so goodbye.